Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I, too, agree with Senator Nesselbush that we are at a point in our history where a decision has to be made. This assembly, this institution, for the last 6 years that I am aware of, have faced the same difficult questions, and over the last 6 years, the question has been just passed from one side to the other. I agree with my good colleague and good friend, Senator Nesselbush, that we all have different views, and that the second bill that I put in with the acknowledgement and wishes of the leadership to allow me to put this bill in was a way in which I thought would help in bringing both sides together. I know that this bill is only for hearing, and there's still an opportunity for the bills to somehow be worked together. I think the disagreement between my bill and Senator Nesselbush's bill is the fact that, one, mine request for a referendum, and two, as far as the exemptions that are included in mine that are not in Senator Nesselbush. With that, I have presented the members of the committee with several documents that I have. So with that, as I go through the statements that I have put together, you have the documents. Kidding with Senator Nesselbush and Senator Lynch, I said I would read every word on every document. That it was not my not my intent, because we would be here for, yeah, right, an hour and a half. So with your pleasure, I will give you what I have to say. Let me begin by saying the political and religious leader, Roger Williams, is best remembered for founding the state of Rhode Island and advocating separation of church and state in colonial America. Williams and his followers settled on Narragansett Bay, where they purchased land from the Narragansett Indians and established a new colony governed by principles of religion, liberty, and separation of church and state. Originally, Roger Williams forced upon the Narragansett Indians a teaching of religions that he was in favor of. After a year or two, he realized that what he was doing was not being fair to the Narragansett Indians by imposing his religion on them. And at that point, he decided that if he was going to have a separation, then the Indians should practice the religion that they had. Nearly a century after his death, Williams' notion of wall of separation between church and state inspired the founders of the United States, who incorporated it into the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Recently, we have a movement to legalize same-sex marriage, and it has adopted a cunning political strategy that is an appeal to everyone. It demands the redefining of marriage in the civil rights movement. This strategy, though cynical and possibly racist, has enormous strategic utility. For what reasonable and fair-minded American would object to the movement that conjures up the images of Martin Luther King along with pacifists marching down, pacifists facing down unleashed attack dogs and men with fire hoses? In the aftermath of the struggle for racial justice, who today is prepared to risk being branded a bigot for opposing a homosexual activist agenda? This strategy is brilliant playing of race card and a misuse of the African American history. But the partisans of homosexual marriage have a problem. There is no evidence in the historiological literature of the civil rights movement or in the movement's genesis in the struggle against slavery to support their political and moral arguments of equivalence. The civil rights movement was born with the establishment of the U.S. as a slaveholding republic. This included kidnapping and brutal transport of blacks and stripping them of their identity, their language, for the purpose of exploiting them. In fact, the campaign for homosexual marriage is ironically an assertion of white privilege. Let us consider the question of rights. What makes the gay agenda aspiration to overturn thousands of years of universally recognized morality and practice a right? Why should the institution designed for the reproduction of civil society, for the rearing of children and the moral environment, be accommodated to relationships integrated around intrinsically non-marital conduct? One must, in the current discussion, address the assertion of discrimination. The claims that the definition of marriage as a union of one man and one woman constitutes discrimination is based on a false analogy, with statutory prohibitions on interracial marriages in many states during the 20th century. This alleged analogy collapses when one considers the skin pigmentation is utterly irrelevant to the procreative and unitive functions of marriage. Racial differences do not affect or interfere with the ability of sexual complementary spouses to become one through sexual intercourse. The law of marital consummation makes it clear that this is a bodily union, serves as the foundation of the sharing of life at every level: biological, emotional, dispositional, rational, and spiritual. The word discrimination has now been emptied of its normative and historical content, thereby serving to disadvantage blacks in American society. Member of any group privileged now can simply invoke the term and launch their own personalized civil rights industry. Defending the civil rights legacy likely will be a cool comfort to the historical advocated based on the loss of distinctive nature of its own fault. Teaching in school to the use of the term civil rights, the notion of civil rights has been diluted and nearly emptied the content and the relationship to the historical experience of blacks in this country. Communities had suffered more from the weakening of marriage at the hand of the doctrines of sexual evolution. In closing, I have also submitted the most recent survey from the Rhode Island Department of Health, which I will not read. It's part of the reading that I presented to you. And I thank you for my time on this matter and my ability to come before the committee and state my feelings. Hopefully, between now and the next time we come back, if there is some meeting of the minds, we might come back with one bill.